Hey guys, Alec Torelli, and welcome back to an episode of the Hand of the Day. I'm really excited to announce our brand new membership programs at Conscious Poker. We have two awesome membership programs which feature a community of aspiring players looking to come together and learn poker. That's really what we're trying to create here, and it's the base of our community. In order to make that happen, we have a private forum which is moderated by a Conscious Poker coach. This is someone who I've trained, who's taken my products, and who's worked with me personally and gone through my program. He's awesome, and he will be giving you guys feedback within the forums. This is also a place where you can connect with other like-minded players, share your story, talk about poker, and improve your strategy content. In addition, there's a database of video library, like the video that I'm going to show you today. This is actually from the membership program, and I really want to give you guys a taste of what you'll experience on the inside, and I'm going to give you more in-depth strategy in this video, things that I don't have time to go into during my normal Hand of the Day episode. You'll also get updates with weekly content and access to me to ask me questions and submit your Hand of the Day questions to me, and my Grinder and Pro membership users will get priority access. In addition, the Pro membership features one nuance that the Grinder membership doesn't, which is we have monthly group coaching sessions with me. So everyone in the program will jump on a group conference call, and we'll go a deep dive into a subject matter, and then there'll be live Q&A afterwards. If you're interested and want to support the programs, check out the links below this video. You can get more information about each of the programs. I highly encourage you guys to join. I think this will be really the premier place to learn poker strategy content on the internet. I'm really trying to make it the best place to learn poker. So thank you guys so much for your support. Now check out this video and get a taste of what it's like to become a Grinder or Pro member at Conscious Poker. Welcome to a Hand of the Day episode here, brought to you by Conscious Poker. This hand is from Poker Night in America. I'm playing in Florida. Sorry, I had to think about where I was. 25.50 no limit hold'em cash game, and there's a $100 straddle. So there's 3 blinds here. It's a televised game, 8-handed. So the game plays a little differently because it's on TV. It's also a little bit shorter handed, so a little bit less, a few less players, I should say. So the game's going to play a little bit looser. Those are some things to keep in mind. This hand kicks off here with me in second position, but it's really in the hijack. So it's kind of weird that it's so short, plus the straddle, you're automatically in late position, even under the gun. There's me drinking a big green juice. Don't ask. So I opt to open here to 400. Now, some things to think about here when deciding opening ranges. If you look at something like preflop charts or game theory optimal opening ranges, this is definitely not in there. I'm totally not going to pretend like this is a GTO open, but there are other things I consider when playing, and this is, I guess, somewhat of a justification, but bear with me. There's some other things I consider when playing live poker, especially on a televised game, that go beyond my immediate math of just the EV of this specific open. So while I wouldn't recommend opening a hand this loose necessarily in the average live game, in this game I opened because, frankly, there's a lot of value in me playing hands. There's a lot of value in me being in big pots. There's a lot of value in me getting on TV. And so there's just other things to consider in these sorts of games. So I do play looser in these games on average than I would otherwise for that reason. But I wanted to just be clear about why I make some of these plays. This is a default fold. So if you're in the cutoff and there's 3 blinds, you could open. One of the things I would use here is a sliding scale to determine whether or not you should play borderline hands like this one. You could definitely open this hand on the button. You could probably open this hand on the cutoff. You could maybe open it in the hijack like I did with 3 blinds. But what's more important than focusing on my specific hand and my reasons for opening, which probably aren't going to apply to your situation, is the variables that you should use to be making these sorts of decisions. So one of the things I like to consider when deciding whether or not to open is who's in the straddle, how loose are the players behind me, and how likely am I to see a flop. So the more of those things I have going in my favor, the more likely I am to open wider. I must have determined that in this spot I could open profitably, even in lieu of the fact that there are a few players behind me. It's really unlikely I'm going to get 3-bet in this game, must have been my thinking, which I think is a reasonable thought here. So Tarzia calls, Mizzi calls, Sigel and Jaffe both call. So you can see here that while King 6 isn't a great hand to have in terms of like it's not at the top of your opening range, it's at the bottom of your opening range, frankly, the fact that people here are willing to call with hands that would otherwise be folds makes your sliding scale more playable. In other words, you could play looser hands because other people play looser as well. Mizzi calling with Jack 10 off is a call that people would generally not make. They would generally fold those hands, like GTO says to fold. So when people are playing like 7 deuce, of course, is a fold as well. So when people are calling with worse hands, your equity is going to be better against a random hand that they're calling with, so you can afford to open wider. If you add that up and combine that with the lead in the hand plus your post-flop skill advantage, you can justify opening more hands in your cash game. So I open here, big blind checks, small blind, big blind check. I got 2 people behind me. Pretty good board for my hand here. I'm going to get value from some 6s. I'm going to get value from maybe even like 5s will call me once on this board because people play pretty loose in these games. I'm going to get value from some draws. I might get floated by like Queen Jack of clubs. So I think betting here is the best strategy. It sort of sucks to check call here without the lead, and I just think charging a draw is better than letting people get free cards here. So I'd like to bet and narrow the field. If I get one caller, I can still win the hand. It's not like I'm betting with, ace jack here, only planning on bluffing. It's like I'm semi-betting for value. I understand that not all better hands are going to call. Some people might fold. Like if the guy to my left has 7s, 8s, or 9s, he's probably going to fold that because he has other players behind him. So I'm getting some better hands to fold. I'm getting some worse hands to call if, for example, it gets folded around at the big blind and the big blind has 6-5. He might peel once. He might peel once with 8-9. He might peel once with a flush draw. He might peel with 4-5. So I'm getting worse hands to call. I'm getting some better hands to fold. I'm narrowing the field. I think betting is the right play, but it's important to understand why we're betting here and always have an intention when making a play. So I bet 900, where if you look at the pot, it's 2,075. 900 is pretty small. And that allows worse hands to call, and it also allows me a good price on my bluffs. So I like the sizing I chose here, and I think it's the right play in line with my strategy. Now, Mizzi calls on the button, which is totally standard. He has top pair, backdoor flush draw, trivial call. He's in position. Folds. Everyone else has pretty clear folds as well. And at this point, it's not just like I'm going to barrel away when the best player in the hand in position, like a good player in position, aside from me, where like 2 good players playing against each other, calls me in position on the button. It's not a spot where I'm just going to unload the clip and try and bluff or try and get super thin value. It's like a spot where this is the worst thing that could happen other than getting raised by someone. But like, the big blind calling is totally different because their range is so much wider. They're calling in the big blind after 4 other people call, closing the action. They're going to have a lot of hands that are worse than mine, A, because they're in the big blind calling preflop with them, and B, because they're closing the action. And they're out of position, so I'm in a better spot. When Mizzi calls with 3 people behind him and he called preflop on the button, my hand just sucks. It shrunk up. So I'm not loving my spot. I understand that I beat diamonds. I beat some floats if he's floating with like Queen Jack of clubs, but that's sort of unlikely as well. So I'm planning on just being done with the hand pretty much regardless, unless I improve. But when a diamond comes off, I'm totally done, because now if I wasn't beat, I'm definitely beat, unless he has like 4-5 suited. But now I beat nothing. Even if he was floating with 8-9 or 7-9 or 7-8, I'm now beat by those. So now my only play is to check fold, and that is my intention here. I really can't do much about it. I do like to think for a second or two in these spots, just because when I do have hands like flushes, or I have hands like sets or aces with no diamond, I'm going to think for a second about what I'm going to do. So given that I'm still in the hand, given that I still have some equity, I have very little equity against this hand, but if he had something like pocket jacks with no diamond, I'd have some equity against, more equity. But regardless of my equity in the hand, like when I'm in the hand and competing, it's important to take the same lines with strong hands as you would weak hands, just so that you're not giving away anything. You don't want to check instantly and just, give up a tell. So here I hit a great card on the river. Now, it's important to understand what we're going to do here and why. First of all, let's take a look at what Mizzi's range looks like. Mizzi calls the flop, checks back the turn. So when he checks back the turn, he's telling us a lot about his hand. It means that he's really unlikely to have hands like 2-pair or better, because he would always bet those on the turn. So hands like 6-8, 10-8, pocket 10s, pocket 8s, pocket 6s, a flush are almost always going to bet the turn, trying to get 2 streets of value and build a pot, especially when we're really, really deep. So when he does check this turn, it tells me that his hand is sort of face up. In other words, at this point in the hand when the king comes, it's a bluff catcher, unless he has something like king 10. It's basically a hand like 8x, 10x, pocket jacks. He might bet jacks on the turn, but something like that, where like a 10 that has weak value. He might even bet ace 10 on the turn, to be honest, but probably not. But it's basically a hand like the one that he has. So in this spot, it might seem trivial. Alec, you have 2-pair, his hand is sort of face up, you should bet here. But it's important to understand what I'm doing when I bet, not just with this hand, but in general, and what types of hands we should be betting in this spot on the river. In this spot, my hand range when I bet suddenly becomes sort of stronger than Mizzi's. And the leverage in the hand goes back to me as the aggressor. The reason is that I could theoretically check hands like flushes, sets, 2 pairs, straights on the turn, going for value as a check raise, or going for balance to balance my range when I have weaker hands. But it's really hard that Mizzi has those hands in his range. So it's much better for me to bet this river with some bluffs and this hand, because it makes me harder to play against. If I did have something like king queen, I would also bet here for value, because Mizzi's hand looks like a 10x type hand. I would want to get value from my hand. I'm never going to get raised on this river given how he played it. So it puts him in a very, very tough spot when I bet, because I could theoretically be betting a 1-pair type hand for value here. So this is also a good spot to bluff if I have you could set up a GTO range for bluffing. We're not going to get too much into that, but bluff with a reasonable frequency, because there's so many value bets in your range here that you could reasonably bluff this river. Let's be honest. You raised in early position pre-flop, you bet into 4 people on the flop. Just because you check this turn doesn't mean your hand is weak. And if your hand was weak, like you were bluffing, the king hit a lot of your bluffing range. You can have king queen, king jack, ace king. So this is a great spot to bet the river, regardless of whether you're bluffing or not. And so I would be bluffing here a decent bit of the time, and I would be value betting all king X hands or better to get value from what looks like jack 10, queen 10, ace 10 type of hand that Mizzi has, maybe even an 8. So I like a bet here from me. And sizing, I don't know what I did. I think I did 2,400, 2,500. I think 2/3 pot is fine. Half pot might be a little bit, might put him in a tougher spot, but I think it might be a little bit too small. I think long term, 2/3 pot, 3/4 pot puts him in a tougher spot. And so I'm all for doing that, even though in this particular hand, I'd like to bet 950 and just get guaranteed to get the call. I think long term, really putting his range into a tough spot, which is what I'm doing when I bet 2,600 or 2/3 pot, 3/4 pot, is the right play. And that's the type of player you want to be. You want to be a player that's really, really tough to play against. So I like to play for my range. I like to play for the long term. I like to play to put my opponents in tough decisions. And I think this bet accomplishes that. So I did get lucky in this hand. I acknowledge that the king came that made me, talk through this hand and look good. But I think it's important to separate the results from the intentions and the actions. And so this hand, I set it up right. I think that the logic was there, and I hope you took something away from it. So the results of this hand aren't too important. You'll see that I'm much more about the process than I am about the results. I don't want to take too much of your time here because I don't think there's any more to learn from this video, but Mizzi does end up folding, and I do end up winning the hand. But regardless of whether he calls or folds, it's important to separate out your action from the result. And I think the bet is right because you can see he's tanking. You can see he's in a tough spot. He really doesn't know what to do, and he's sort of playing a guessing game here. Like, am I bluffing? Am I not? he's going to assume I'm bluffing at the right frequency, and it's kind of like he's in a spot where it's kind of like a coin toss either way, whether he calls or folds. That's the type of player you want to be to put people in those tough spots. So that's it for this hand. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. If you're interested and want to support the programs, check out the links below this video. You can get more information about each of the programs. I highly encourage you guys to join and get a taste of what it's like to become a grinder or a pro member at Conscious Poker.